The morning sun rose over New Austin like it had for the past 15 years, painting the sky in soft shades of purple and gold. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Harmony, watching the peaceful planet below through the wide viewing windows. The sight never got old. Children were probably getting ready for school down there, parents heading to work, farmers tending to their crops under the alien sun. Jake smiled as he thought about how far humanity had come. Just 200 years ago, humans were still fighting each other over water and food on Earth. Now they lived on 14 different worlds, working alongside alien species that had once seemed like something from old movies. The Galactic Confederation had welcomed humanity with open arms, even if some species still thought of them as the new kids on the block. "Captain, we're getting a message from Ambassador White on Nexus Prime," said Lieutenant Betty Clark from her station. The young communications officer had been born on New Austin and had never seen Earth. To her, this was home. Jake nodded and activated the main screen. Ambassador Karen White appeared, her face showing the tired but satisfied look of someone who had spent years building bridges between worlds. Behind her, the massive towers of Nexus Prime stretched toward the sky, home to representatives from hundreds of different species. "Jake, good to see you," Karen said with a warm smile. "How are things looking down there?" "Peaceful as always," Jake replied. "Dr. Campbell is studying some new plant species the colonists found near the southern continent. Rick is reviewing security protocols, though I keep telling him we don't need them out here." Commander Rick Taylor looked up from his station and shrugged. "Old habits die hard, Captain. Just because we've had 15 years of peace doesn't mean we should get careless." Rick had served in the old Terran military before humanity joined the Confederation. Sometimes Jake wondered if the man missed the action, but Rick seemed content enough helping with exploration missions and keeping the crew sharp. "Any word from the other colonies?" Jake asked. "New Seattle is ahead of schedule on the new ship. Construction," Karen reported. "They're building 3 more exploration vessels like the Harmony. Prairie Haven just finished their harvest, and they're sending food supplies to 6 different worlds. The Zephyrians are particularly fond of our wheat, apparently," Jake chuckled. The Zephyrians were an ancient race that had been exploring space for thousands of years before humans learned to make fire. The fact that they liked human food was both amusing and oddly touching. "Speaking of the Zephyrians," Karen continued, "Counselor Eth Prime wanted me to thank you personally for the cultural exchange program. The young Zephyrians who visited New Austin last month can't stop talking about human music." "Tell the counselor we're happy to help," Jake said. "That's what we're here for, right? Building friendships across the stars." It was true. The Harmony carried no weapons, only scientific equipment and gifts for other species. The ship's cargo holds were filled with art, music, books, and samples of human culture. Jake's crew included scientists, diplomats, and teachers, not soldiers. It was exactly what humanity had promised when they joined the Confederation. Dr. Lisa Campbell joined them on the bridge, her arms full of data tablets and specimens from the planet below. She was one of the best xenobiologists in human space, and her enthusiasm for studying alien life was infectious. "Captain, you have to see this," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "The plant life here isn't just adapted to the local conditions. It's actively working to make the soil better for human crops. It's like the planet is trying to help us." "That's wonderful, Lisa," Jake said. "Another example of how well we fit into the galactic community." "The Confederation's charter really works," Rick added, though his tone was more cautious. "Every species contributes what they can, and everyone benefits. Humans bring creativity and adaptability. The Zephyrians provide wisdom and technology. The Altarians handle trade and commerce. Everyone has a role." Jake nodded, thinking about how lucky humanity was to have found such a place in the galaxy. After centuries of war and struggle on Earth, it felt like they had finally found their purpose among the stars. "Captain," Betty called out, her voice suddenly tense. "I'm picking up some strange signals from the outer system. Long-range sensors are detecting a large fleet approaching." Jake felt a chill run down his spine, but he kept his voice calm. "What kind of fleet, Betty?" Unknown configuration, she replied, fingers flying over her controls. The ships are big, really big, and they're not responding to our communication attempts. Rick was already at his station, pulling up tactical displays. Captain, these aren't Confederation vessels. The energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. Jake stared at the readings on the screen. The approaching fleet was massive, bigger than anything he had ever seen. The ships looked wrong somehow, organic rather than mechanical, like they had been grown instead of built. Get me a connection to New Austin Command, Jake ordered, and send a priority message to Ambassador White. Jake, what's going on? Karen asked from the main screen. She could see the concern on his face. We have visitors, Jake replied grimly, and they're not here to trade recipes. Within minutes, the situation became clear. The approaching fleet belonged to the Vorthak Dominion, a militant empire from the galaxy's outer rim. Unlike the peaceful species of the Confederation, the Vorthak believed in conquest and domination. They had been expanding their territory for decades, but they had never come this close to human space before. Captain, Rick said quietly, the evacuation protocols are ready. We can start moving civilians off the planet within the hour. Jake looked down at New Austin, thinking about the 2.3 million people living their quiet lives below. Families having breakfast, kids playing in parks, farmers working in fields. They had no idea what was coming. How long until the Vorthak fleet arrives? Jake asked. At their current speed, 3 days, Betty answered. Then we have 3 days to get everyone out, Jake said. Send the evacuation order to all human colonies. This isn't just about New Austin anymore. But even as he gave the order, Jake knew it wouldn't be enough. The Vorthak fleet was too big, too fast. They would arrive before the evacuation could be completed. He looked at his crew, good people who had signed up to explore the galaxy and make friends with alien species, not to face an enemy that wanted to destroy everything they had built. Captain, Rick said softly, the Harmony isn't equipped for this kind of situation. We should leave with the first evacuation ships. Jake looked at the planet below, then at his crew. Lisa was still holding her plant specimens. Betty was trying to coordinate with other ships in the system, and Rick was doing his best to prepare for something none of them had ever faced before. No, Jake said finally. We stay. These people are counting on us to help them get to safety. That's what we do. We help people. The next 3 days would change everything. The galaxy was about to learn that some species were more dangerous when awakened than when left alone. But for now, Jake Morrison and his crew prepared to do what humans had always done best: protect the innocent, even when the odds were impossible. 2. Peaceful dawn on New Austin was ending, and the darkness that followed would teach both humanity and the galaxy lessons they would never forget. The Vorthak fleet arrived 2 days early. Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the Harmony as the massive bioships dropped out of hyperspace like falling meteors. The alien vessels were even more terrifying up close, their hulls pulsing with a sickly green light that seemed to breathe. Captain, they're not responding to any of our messages, Betty reported, her voice shaking. I've tried everything. Standard greetings, emergency frequencies, even basic mathematical sequences. Jake gripped the armrest of his chair. Below them, New Austin looked so peaceful in the morning light. The evacuation had only managed to move about 500,000 people off the planet. There were still nearly 2 million civilians down there, including thousands of children. Maybe they just want to talk, Dr. Campbell said hopefully. Maybe this is all a misunderstanding. Rick Taylor shook his head as he studied the tactical readings. Lisa, look at those ships. They're not built for talking. Those are weapons of war. The first sign of the Vorthak's true intentions came when smaller craft began launching from the bioships. These weren't shuttles or transport vessels. They were hunter-killers, living creatures bred for one purpose: to cause pain and terror. Oh, God, Betty whispered as the readings came in. Captain, they're heading straight for the cities. Not the military bases or the spaceports. The cities. Jake felt his blood turn cold. If the Vorthak wanted to conquer New Austin, they would target strategic locations first. But they were going after civilian populations. This wasn't a military operation. This was something much worse. "Get me a channel to Mayor Brooks on the surface," Jake ordered. Susan Brooks appeared on the screen, her face pale but determined. Behind her, Jake could see the chaos of the emergency command center. People were running back and forth trying to coordinate a defense that everyone knew was hopeless. "Jake, thank God," Susan said. "Can you tell us what these things want?" "I don't think they want anything we can give them," Jake replied. "Susan, you need to get your people to the underground shelters now. We're trying, but there are too many people and not enough time. My husband Danny is organizing the civilian defense groups, but they only have farming equipment and hunting rifles." Jake watched the hunter-killer swarms descend on New Austin's capital city like a black cloud. The creatures moved with purpose, but not the purpose of soldiers trying to win a battle. They moved like predators playing with their prey. The first screams reached them through the communication channels. Dr. Campbell was recording everything, her scientific training keeping her focused even as horror filled her eyes. "Captain, these creatures, they're not just killing people. They're doing something to them first." On the screen, Susan Brooks suddenly stiffened. Her face went white as reports flooded in from around the city. "Jake," she whispered, "they're not trying to kill people quickly. They're making it last. The creatures inject something that keeps people awake and aware while they—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Rick was studying the tactical data, his military experience helping him see the pattern that others missed. "Captain, this is psychological warfare. They're not trying to conquer the planet efficiently. They want to traumatize anyone who survives. The hunter-killers systematically targeted hospitals first, then schools, then residential areas. They left the military installations alone, forcing the human defenders to watch helplessly as their families and friends were tortured. The creatures used some kind of neural interface to broadcast the victims' final moments directly into the minds of other civilians." "Why?" Lisa asked, tears streaming down her face. "Why would anyone do this?" "Because they want the galaxy to, see?" Rick said grimly. "They want other species to know what happens when you resist the Vorthak." Jake tried to contact the other human colonies, but the news was just as bad everywhere. New Seattle was under attack. Prairie Haven was burning. The agricultural stations were being systematically destroyed, not to capture them, but to ensure that any survivors would starve. "Captain," Betty called out, "I'm getting a transmission from Ambassador White on Nexus Prime." Karen appeared on the screen, her face streaked with tears. Behind her, Jake could see the elegant halls of the Confederation Council, where representatives from hundreds of species were supposed to work together for peace. "Jake, I've been pleading with the Council for hours," Karen said. "They won't send help. They say it's a frontier conflict and the Confederation Charter doesn't allow interference." "What about the Zephyrians?" Jake asked desperately. "They've been our friends. Surely they'll help." Counselor Eth Prime expressed sympathy. Karen replied bitterly. "He offered to send humanitarian aid after the situation is resolved, but no military assistance. None of them will risk a war with the Vorthak." Jake stared at the screen in disbelief. For 15 years, humanity had worked to build friendships across the galaxy. They had shared their culture, their food, their music. They had helped other species with problems, sent aid during natural disasters, contributed to scientific research. And now, when humans needed help, their so-called friends were turning their backs. "The children," Susan Brooks whispered from the planet's surface. "Jake, they're targeting the children specifically. There's a school in New Hope with 800 kids inside. The creatures are surrounding it, but they're not attacking yet. They're waiting for something." Jake realized what they were waiting for. The Vorthak wanted parents to see their children in danger. They wanted to maximize the psychological impact before they struck. Down on New Austin, Mayor Brooks was coordinating the desperate defense of her city. Her husband Danny led a group of farmers and shop owners against creatures that had been designed for war. They knew they couldn't win, but they fought anyway, buying precious minutes for families to reach the shelters. "This is little Amy Brooks broadcasting from New Austin. came a small voice over the emergency frequency. Susan's 8-year-old daughter had somehow reached the communication center. "If anyone can hear this, please help us. We were your friends. We shared our food with you. We sang songs together. Please don't let them hurt us." The transmission cut off as the Vorthak creatures reached the communication center. Dr. Campbell had stopped recording. She was staring at her screens in horror as the bioweapons did their work. The Vorthak weren't just conquering human colonies. They were conducting experiments in suffering, testing how much pain different species could endure before breaking completely. "Captain," Rick said quietly, "we need to leave. The Harmony isn't armed. We can't help these people, and we'll be next if we stay." Jake looked at his crew. Betty was crying as she listened to the desperate calls from the surface. Lisa was shaking as she watched her scientific instruments record atrocities that no species should ever have to witness. Rick was right. They should leave. It was the logical thing to do. But Jake thought about Amy Brooks, 8 years old, and asking for help from friends who had abandoned her. He thought about the thousands of children in schools below, waiting for rescue that would never come. He thought about the farmers and teachers and artists who had built a peaceful life among the stars, only to have it destroyed by creatures that enjoyed causing pain. "No," Jake said finally. "We stay. We help coordinate the evacuation of the survivors. We make sure the galaxy knows exactly what happened here." "Captain," Rick protested, "we'll die with them." "Maybe," Jake replied, "but at least we'll die as humans, not as cowards who ran when our people needed us." The next few hours would haunt Jake Morrison for the rest of his life. He watched entire cities die screaming. He listened to final messages from parents trying to save their children. He saw the true face of evil, and he understood that the peaceful galaxy he had believed in was a lie. By the end of the day, New Austin was silent. 2.3 million humans were dead, captured, or missing. The few thousand survivors who managed to reach the evacuation ships carried with them recordings of horrors that would change humanity forever. The Vorthak broadcast their victory across all galactic frequencies, sending a clear message to every species in the Confederation. This is what happens to those who oppose us. But they made one critical mistake. They assumed that humanity would react like other species had reacted. They assumed that humans would be broken by what they had witnessed, that they would surrender rather than face more of the same. They were about to learn that humans were different. They were about to discover that some species become more dangerous when you hurt them, not less. The massacre at New Austin was over, but the real war was just beginning. The news reached Earth through quantum communication relays, but the numbers were too big for most people to understand at first. 3 million humans dead, 2 million missing, 11 colonies destroyed in 1 week, children tortured while their parents watched helplessly, friends and allies who turned away when humanity needed them most. President Charles Hamilton stood before the joint session of the Terran Coalition, his face calm, but his eyes burning with something that hadn't been seen in human leaders for 200 years. Behind him, massive screens showed images from New Austin, burned cities, empty playgrounds, schools that would never hear children's laughter again. "My fellow humans," Hamilton began, his voice carrying to every settlement and ship in human space. They wanted to teach the galaxy a lesson. They wanted to show what happens when someone opposes them. Today they're going to learn what happens when you hurt a human child. The transformation began immediately. Across Earth, people who had lived their entire lives in peace suddenly remembered what their species had been before they reached for the stars. Workers in factories stopped making farming equipment and started making weapons. Scientists abandoned research into clean energy and began working on ways to destroy entire star systems. Dr. Angela Foster emerged from laboratories deep beneath the Rockies, carrying data files that had been sealed for 2 centuries. The Omega Protocols, humanity's most devastating military technologies, were unleashed for the first time since the Resource Wars. Weapons that had been banned by treaty because they were too terrible to use against other humans. "Mr. President," Dr. Foster said as she briefed the Emergency Council, "we've been peaceful for so long that the galaxy forgot what we're capable of. They're about to remember." General Kevin Stone, the youngest person ever promoted to Supreme Commander of Terran Forces, revealed the truth that humanity had kept hidden for decades. While publicly maintaining their peaceful image, humans had never actually destroyed their most advanced weapons. The shipyards of Luna and Mars began working around the clock, producing vessels that had only existed in classified blueprints. The galaxy thinks we're soft because we choose peace, General Stone explained to his officers. They don't understand that choosing peace and being unable to fight are two very different things. On Luna Base, Captain Jake Morrison stood in a military briefing room that he had never seen before. The Harmony had been towed to Earth's largest shipyard, where it was being transformed into something entirely different. The scientific equipment was being replaced with weapon systems that could crack planets. The cultural exchange materials were being swapped for ammunition that could sterilize star systems. Jake, General Stone said, I know this isn't what you signed up for. You're an explorer, not a soldier. Jake looked at the tactical displays showing Vorthak territory. Somewhere out there, human prisoners were being tortured for the entertainment of creatures that found joy in causing pain. Somewhere out there, children who had trusted the galaxy to be a safe place were learning that friendship meant nothing when power was at stake. General, Jake replied. 3 days ago, I watched an 8-year-old girl beg the galaxy for help. I watched our so-called friends turn their backs on dying children. I'm not an explorer anymore. I'm whatever humanity needs me to be, Dr. Lisa. Campbell joined the Military Research Division, but she wasn't studying alien plants anymore. She was studying alien biology to find the most effective ways to kill different species. Her knowledge of how Vorthak bodies worked would help create weapons that could cause maximum suffering before death. They wanted us to watch our people die in agony, Lisa said as she worked. Now they'll understand what that feels like. The change wasn't just in the military. Human society itself shifted into something the galaxy had never seen before. Children started learning military tactics alongside their regular subjects. Artists created propaganda that inspired hatred for humanity's enemies. Musicians wrote songs that called for the complete destruction of anyone who threatened human families. Most shocking to the galaxy was humanity's response to peace offers. The Zephyrians sent messages offering to mediate. The Confederation Council proposed negotiations. Other species suggested that maybe the Vorthak could be convinced to leave human space alone in exchange for tribute. Ambassador Karen White delivered humanity's final diplomatic message to the Confederation Council. She stood before the assembled representatives of hundreds of species, her voice carrying across the galaxy. For 15 years we tried to be your friends, Karen said. We shared our culture, our food, our music. We helped you solve problems. We sent aid when you needed it. And when our children were being tortured, you offered us thoughts and prayers. She paused, looking directly at Counselor Eth Prime and the other species who had claimed to be humanity's allies. You stood by and watched while they murdered our babies. Now stand by and watch while we show you what real monsters look like. The Zephyrians, despite their thousands of years of experience and advanced technology, began detecting energy readings from human space that terrified them. Weapon signatures that violated every galactic treaty on technological restraint. Power levels that suggested humans had been hiding capabilities that could threaten entire civilizations. This is impossible, Counselor Eth Prime told the emergency session of the Confederation Council. Our sensors indicate that the humans are building weapons that could destroy multiple star systems. How do they even know how to create such devices? The answer was simple but horrifying. Humans had always known how to build such weapons. They had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing their own kind before they ever reached the stars. The galaxy had seen humanity's capacity for creation and art and assumed that meant they were peaceful by nature. They didn't understand that the same species that could create beautiful music could also design weapons that would give nightmares to ancient civilizations. Admiral Patricia Hayes commanded the first strike force from a hidden base in the asteroid belt. 1,200 ships that had been disguised as mining vessels and cargo haulers were revealed to be weapons of war. These weren't the exploration ships or trade vessels that the galaxy knew. These were instruments of destruction built by a species that understood violence on a level that most aliens couldn't comprehend. Our mission is simple. Admiral Hayes told her fleet commanders. Find every Vorthak in the galaxy. Kill them all. Show no mercy, take no prisoners, accept no surrender. No. They wanted to teach the galaxy about terror. We're going to give them a masterclass. The fleet's first destination was the Vorthak border worlds, where human prisoners were being held in conditions that made the original massacre look merciful. Intelligence reports suggested that the captured humans were being used for biological experiments, testing how much pain different torture methods could inflict. Admiral, Commander Tom Baker reported from the lead ship, we're detecting approximately 400 million Vorthak civilians in the target system. Should we attempt to separate military from civilian targets? Admiral Hayes thought about Amy Brooks, 8 years old and asking for help that never came. She thought about the parents who had been forced to watch their children die slowly. She thought about the galaxy that had abandoned humanity when they needed friends the most. Commander, she replied, they didn't separate military from civilian when they attacked our colonies. Today, every Vorthak is a military target. The transformation was complete. Humanity had tried peace for 15 years, and it had gotten their children murdered. Now they would try something different. The galaxy was about to learn that the same species that created poetry and art could also perfect the science of making entire civilizations disappear. The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying weapons that would rewrite the rules of galactic warfare. Behind them, Earth continued building more ships, more weapons, more tools of destruction than any one species had ever assembled. The sleeping giant was awake, and it was very, very angry. The first Vorthak system died in 17 minutes. Admiral Patricia Hayes watched from her command ship as weapons designed by humanity's darkest minds turned 4 planets into empty space. The bioships that had seemed so terrifying during the massacre of New Austin now screamed as they dissolved, their living hulls unable to resist technology that unmade matter itself at the quantum level. Broadcasting on all Vorthak frequencies, Admiral Hayes announced, her voice carrying across their communication networks. You wanted to teach the galaxy about terror. Class is now in session. The Vorthak had never faced anything like human weapons before. Their biotechnology, which had conquered dozens of species, proved helpless against devices that targeted living tissue with surgical precision. Entire fleets died in agony as their ships literally fell apart around them, the crews inside experiencing the same slow, painful deaths they had inflicted on human children. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding a fleet of converted research vessels, had become an expert in psychological warfare. His ships carried speakers that broadcast the final screams of dying Vorthak back to their home worlds, using the same neural interface technology the aliens had employed against human prisoners. You made our children feel their pain, Morrison's voice echoed across Vorthak space. Now feel your own. But humanity didn't stop at military targets. Every Vorthak world, every station, every outpost became a target for complete destruction. The same species that had once shared their music and art with the galaxy now demonstrated an understanding of cruelty that made their enemies look like amateurs. Dr. Lisa Campbell had created diseases that affected only Vorthak biology. Plagues that caused maximum suffering before death. Viruses that kept victims conscious and aware while their bodies slowly shut down. She released these weapons on populated worlds, watching through long-range sensors as entire civilizations writhed in agony. They wanted to experiment on our people, Lisa said, as she monitored the biological weapons' progress. Consider this, a field test of our own research. Commander Rick Taylor led ground forces that didn't simply conquer Vorthak worlds. They systematically destroyed every trace of Vorthak culture, language, and history. Libraries were burned, art was smashed, and any record of their civilization was erased from existence. This wasn't conquest. This was the complete elimination of a species from the universe. We're not just killing them, Rick explained to his troops. We're making sure they never existed at all. Future generations will search the galaxy and find no trace that the Vorthak were ever here. The galactic community watched in growing horror as humanity demonstrated capabilities that violated every assumption about civilized behavior. The same species that had created beautiful paintings and touching poetry was now crafting weapons designed to cause suffering on scales that traumatized even hardened military observers from other species. "This has to stop," Counselor Eth Prime declared during an emergency session of the Confederation Council. "The humans have gone too far. They're becoming worse than the Vorthak ever were." But when the Zephyrians sent their most advanced warships to intervene, these vessels were destroyed so quickly that their final transmissions consisted only of shocked silence. Human weapons technology had advanced beyond anything the galaxy thought possible. Ships that had taken the Zephyrians centuries to build were reduced to scrap metal in seconds. "You should have helped us when we asked nicely," Admiral Hayes broadcast to the Zephyrian fleet as it died. "Now you get to watch what happens when humans stop being polite." Within 3 months, the Vorthak Dominion was losing entire sectors, every day. Their empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, was being systematically dismantled by weapons that defied understanding. Human fleets moved through Vorthak space like a plague, leaving nothing but empty systems behind. The few Vorthak who tried to surrender discovered that humanity was no longer interested in mercy. Prisoners were subjected to the same torture methods the Vorthak had used on human captives, but with scientific precision that made the aliens' crude techniques look primitive by comparison. "Please," begged a Vorthak commander whose ship had been captured intact. "We surrender. We'll leave your space. We'll never return." Captain Morrison looked at the alien through the cell bars, thinking about Amy Brooks and her final message to the galaxy. "You had your chance to leave us alone. You chose to hurt our children instead. Now you get to experience what that feels like." The prisoner was handed over to Dr. Campbell's research team for biological experimentation. The irony was not lost on anyone. By the 6th month, the Confederation Council was receiving reports that defied belief. Entire Vorthak worlds were disappearing from long-range sensors. Not destroyed in the conventional sense, but actually removed from existence as if they had never been there at all. Space itself was being rewritten by human weapons. "How is this possible?" demanded the Altarian trade representative. "They were a peaceful species just months ago. How do they have technology that surpasses our oldest civilizations?" Ambassador Karen White provided the answer during what would be her final appearance before the council. She stood at the speaker's podium, her face showing no emotion as she delivered humanity's message to the galaxy. "You think we became peaceful because we evolved beyond violence," Karen said. "You're wrong. We became peaceful because we got so good at violence that we scared ourselves. We've spent 10,000 years learning how to kill our own kind efficiently. Did you really think we forgot those lessons?" She paused, looking around the chamber at representatives from species that had abandoned humanity in their darkest hour. "You taught us that the galaxy doesn't reward peace or friendship. You taught us that strength is the only thing that matters. We've learned that lesson very well." The war ended exactly 1 year after the massacre at New Austin. The Vorthak Dominion, an empire that had conquered dozens of worlds and terrorized countless species, simply ceased to exist. Not defeated, not conquered, but completely eliminated from the universe. Every Vorthak individual, every trace of their technology, every planet they had ever inhabited was reduced to empty space and cooling gas. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of her flagship as the last Vorthak stronghold was erased from existence. Her weapons had rewritten the laws of physics themselves, creating holes in space where matter simply couldn't exist anymore. "Mission accomplished," she reported to Earth. "The Vorthak threat has been permanently eliminated." The human fleet returned to Earth. But the humanity that emerged from this war was fundamentally different from the one that had sought peaceful coexistence among the stars. Children born after the war grew up learning not just alien languages, but also the tactical capabilities of every species they might someday need to fight. Captain Morrison, now Admiral Morrison, stood on the bridge of the rebuilt UES Harmony. The ship was no longer a diplomatic vessel, but humanity's most advanced warship, bristling with weapons that could sterilize entire star systems. Through the viewports, he could see the rebuilt colonies spreading across space that had once belonged to the Vorthak. "Admiral," his new communications officer reported, "we're receiving a message from the Confederation Council. They're requesting a meeting to discuss humanity's role in galactic security. Morrison smiled coldly. Tell them we'll consider their request. After all, we wouldn't want them to think we're not interested in maintaining galactic peace. The galaxy had a new reality to face. Humanity was no longer the eager junior partner seeking acceptance among the stars. They were the species that other civilizations feared to cross, the ones who had proven that some sleeping giants should never be awakened. On the rebuilt New Austin, children played in parks where Amy Brooks had once broadcast her final plea for help. Their laughter echoed where screams had once filled the air, but carved into every memorial stone was a simple warning that would be remembered across the galaxy. Never again. The sleeping giant was awake, and it would never sleep again. The galaxy was safer now, but at a price that no one had imagined. Humanity had learned that sometimes the only way to protect innocence was to abandon it completely. Peace through superior firepower was not the lesson humanity had wanted to teach the galaxy, but it was the only lesson the galaxy seemed willing to learn.